the desires of the American people who are war-weary right now. We cannot expend resources we don't have, and we can't keep sending our troops over and doing the fighting for somebody else when it's up to them at a certain point to defend themselves. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Rohrabacher. Mr. Cicilline.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary. It's a great pleasure to have you before our committee, and thank you for the spectacular work you are doing on behalf of our country. I think, like many members of Congress, are very concerned about the capability and the capacity and really the corruption. And those two things have been cited as really major obstacles to improving the rule of law in Afghanistan. And so my question really is, how do we ensure that the billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer funds that are being spent in this country are being used for the intended purpose and used effectively when corruption and a lack of governmental capacity and capability remain two big obstacles? And I'm interested to know what your thoughts on how long it will take before these factors are no longer a major obstacle. And, just to use an example, in the State Department CBO justification, there's a call for $4.35 billion in funding which includes a request of $1.1 billion for economic support funds. And when you take that investment in economic development in Afghanistan and compare it to our own, sort of the two largest loan programs administered by the United States Small Business Administration, which total about $574 million, which is roughly a third of the amount we're sending to Afghanistan for economic support, it's a very hard thing for my constituents to understand in this difficult economy that we're investing those kinds of resources to rebuild the economy of Afghanistan when we have such urgent needs here. And in the context of this lack of capacity and this pervasive corruption, it makes it even more difficult for people to understand. So I'd love to know how you think we are proceeding on those fronts and when we can expect the Afghan people to have the ability to do this work on their own so that we can direct those resources back here to our own country and to the urgent needs facing constituents in Rhode Island and in my district.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman. And I certainly understand and sympathize with the legitimate questions of your constituents and of Americans everywhere. I think that the drawdown of troops in Iraq represents a very large net savings to the American taxpayers. The withdrawal on a very measured basis from Afghanistan similarly provides, because our civilian assistance is, frankly, such a small percentage of the overall money that is spent, the vast majority of which comes from our DOD security forces. So I think that we are aware of that. We think we are on the right track. But specifically with respect to capacity and corruption, corruption remains a fundamental challenge, not only in Afghanistan, but frankly around the world. I find it one of our biggest problems. It is a cancer in so many countries whose leaders care more about enriching themselves and their families and their associates as opposed to making investments that will provide a better future for their own people. And so the key is to build institutional capacity, create systems, and that's exactly what we are doing in Afghanistan. We're taking an integrated civilian-military approach because, again, the largest sums of money that people have worried about feeding corruption have come from the enormous amount of money coming in associated with our military activities. So both state and DOD, and of course USAID, are absolutely committed. We are promoting the enforcement of anti-corruption laws and regulations. We're doing ethics trainings. We're including civil servants and judiciary personnel in that. We support the Afghanistan. It worries greatly about the heroin trade that comes out of Afghanistan, and that is a big domestic problem for Russia. So we are appreciative of the role that they are now playing.
And finally, Madam Secretary, as we pull out of Iraq, and I know the agreement about 2014 Afghanistan, I'm wondering what is the response of NATO and ISAF and the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council, the Istanbul Initiative, and the contact countries? Do these organizations still remain as a cohesive command, and what role will they be playing in the region generally? Because I just thought that staying together in that regard is tremendously important.
Well, I think, Congressman, the commitment that was made last year at the, or earlier this year, I guess, at the Lisbon NATO summit to remain involved, to have an enduring partnership with Afghanistan was a very strong signal that NATO countries understand that the stability of Afghanistan affects their national security as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Madam Secretary, thank you for being here today. And I was really very impressed by your visit to Pakistan. I've had the privilege of visiting there, and I was so impressed by their military. We were there to encourage the Pakistani military and the U.S. Marines for the earthquake recovery several years ago in Muzaffarabad. The organization was professional. The military itself was very, very positive. In particular, I was very pleased there was a young U.S. Marine who was of Pakistani-American heritage, had been trained at Parris Island in South Carolina. And to see our working together, because we can and we should. With that in mind, the foreign assistance programs that we have in Pakistan that you've helped initiate, do you believe they're making sufficient progress, and by what metrics are you judging the level of progress?
Well, Congressman, first, thank you for traveling there, and I share your very strong endorsement of the positive work that was done between the Pakistani military and the United States military in earthquake relief, and it was a real model, and we're very proud of that. With respect to the civilian assistance, you know, we actually do think that we are making a difference, but it sometimes gets overwhelmed by all the other activities that go on in our relationship. We will be sending you the latest status report on what we have done in next week, I think. And, you know, we've built roads. We have increased their energy production. We have the world's largest Fulbright exchange. The assistance we give to civil society. I did a town hall meeting in Islamabad, and several people, both publicly and privately, thanked us for the programs that had made a difference in their understanding of how to put together voluntary organizations, how to engage with their government. None of this is easy, and none of it, frankly, is without challenge, but I really believe we have to stay the course on this.
Also, I've been very encouraged that with India, that Pakistan is developing a most favored nation trade status with India. I've been the co-chairman twice of the India caucus, and I have a deep interest in actually the biggest beneficiary of a level of stability in Pakistan is India. And why do you think this is moving at this time, and what can be done to promote a level of trade and positive contact between India and Pakistan?
Well, Congressman, I agree with you that the real game changer in the region is not so much our bilateral relationship as the relationship between Pakistan and India. And the more that there can be progress, the more likely there can be even more progress. So we have in Pakistan today a leadership, both civilian and military, that wants to see progress with India, and we have the same on the Indian side. There have been successful visits just in the last several months at the foreign minister level, the commerce minister level. Announcements have been made to try to streamline visas for businesses, do more to accelerate movement across borders. And then the most favored nation status is a really important development. So we encourage it. We try to tell both sides how much it will change their relationship. And, You know, and when I was in Chennai last summer, I spoke about a new Silk Road where, you know, goods could go from Chennai up to Kazakhstan, and it would go through Pakistan, it would go through Afghanistan. I firmly believe greater regional economic integration would revolutionize the economy in Pakistan. You know, India is a huge market, and Pakistan produces things that India needs, but they don't get into India in any direct and cost-effective way. So the more we can do that, the better.
Well, I share your enthusiasm, and indeed all of Central Asia could benefit so much, even into Western Siberia. And so I appreciate your enthusiasm for that, recognition of it, promotion of it, and every effort to reduce and eliminate cross-border terrorism, which has been such a tragedy for the people of India. And I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Madam Secretary, Mr. Carnahan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome back, Madam Secretary. I want to try to get at least one comment and a couple of questions in here with my allotted time. First, as you know, with Chris Smith, my colleague, co-chair of the Bosnian caucus, and so I'm taking this opportunity to make an off-topic comment like others have done today. But and I represent one of the largest populations of Bosnian Americans in the country in St. Louis. But as we all know, reforms are stalled, progress is in question, and the increasing risk to the region from inaction. I guess my comment is, we all agree we need a solution, but first we really need a vehicle that can bring together the Bosnian people, their leaders, neighboring countries, the EU, and of course U.S. leadership is essential. So I would hope that we could work with you and the appropriate folks in the department to look for such a vehicle to move that process forward so it doesn't backslide and create what I think could be a big problem. Back on topic here, as you know, I've long supported active U.S. engagement around the world. I believe the Obama administration's shift and certainly your leadership to a policy of smart power and responsible participation in international organizations has been in our great interest, our security interest, our economic interest, and our values around the world. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan has been essential in developing that country. Also engages 80% of the cost with our partners that are helping share that burden. My question is to ensure that UNAMA has the ability to take on an even bigger role as the U.S. prepares to draw down its troop presence in the future, and also what effect would the cuts proposed by this committee have on the UN's ability to pursue that important work?
Well, Congressman, first, we would be delighted to work with you and Congressman Smith on Bosnia because we share your concerns and we would love to consult with you. So I'll reach out and we'll set up a time to do that.
Hey.
On UNAMA, I think their activities in Afghanistan are essential to the safety and security of our troops, our civilian employees, and the success of the transition. And as I wrote to the chair earlier this month, I'm deeply concerned that the proposed UN reform bill mandates actions which would severely limit U.S. participation in the UN and therefore gravely harm our interests. Put aside anybody else's interests. I'm focused first and foremost on ours. You know, the bill's requirement that the U.S. withhold 50% of its contribution until the UN shifts to a voluntary funding scheme for most of its programs would undermine our leadership at a time when we really have to be at the very forefront. And we're being asked now to do more with less anyway. We get a lot for our investment out of UNAMA because, as you say, the bulk of the funding is carried by others, and they are an absolutely critical partner in building Afghan civilian capacity, monitoring human rights, supporting Afghan elections. Everything we've talked about today, we partner closely on a literally hour-by-hour basis with UNAMA, and if we can't depend on UNAMA, we'll have to pay for or invent some other entity because we don't have another partner that has the credibility or the reach that UNAMA has.
Thank you. And finally, just want to get your brief comment. You've been a great champion for including minorities and especially women in transition to Afghan control. Just give us a brief synopsis on what the administration is doing to prepare for the upcoming Bonn conference and beyond to ensure that that happens.
Well, I thank you again, Congressman, because you've been a great champion for the women of Afghanistan as well. And, we